All right, let's jump right in. We all use roads, right? But how should we really price the use of something as everyday as a public highway? Well, it turns out the answer to that question reveals this really powerful economic idea that applies to, well, almost everything around us. So let's kick things off with a question that seems super simple on the surface, but actually has some pretty profound economic implications. See, when that truck is moving goods from point A to point B, it's not just delivering a product, it's also imposing these hidden costs on the entire system and on every single person who uses it.
Think about it like this. Every single vehicle, and especially a heavy truck, causes a tiny, tiny amount of damage to the pavement. Now that damage adds up, right? It makes the road rougher. And that increased roughness, in turn, jacks up the operating costs. We're talking fuel, repairs, for every other vehicle that drives on that road later. These are very real costs, but they're almost never paid for directly by the vehicle that's actually causing them. So in economics, these hidden costs have a name. They're called externalities. And public finance theory has been arguing for like over a century that for a system to work efficiently, these external costs have to be internalized. Basically, that just means the person causing the cost should be the one to pay for it. And if you get that pricing wrong, the consequences are huge. Underprice the roads and you get way too much traffic and congestion. Overprice them and you end up stifling business and trade.
So here's the crucial point. The ideal price for using a road isn't zero. And it's not just some random flat fee. It should be exactly equal to the incremental social cost that one extra vehicle puts on everybody else. But that, of course, leads to a massive question. And this is where things get really tricky. This presents a massive intellectual challenge. How in the world do you actually measure that incremental cost? It's not just about looking at maintenance budgets. It's about this really complex dance between engineering and economics. For starters, and this is pretty obvious, not all vehicles are created equal. Engineering studies that go back decades have shown that road damage isn't linear. It actually increases disproportionately with the weight on a vehicle's axle. And this is just wild. It's the famous fourth power law. It means that if you double the weight on an axle, you don't just double the damage. Nope. You increase it by a factor of 16. A single heavy truck can cause literally thousands of times more damage than a passenger car.
But the economic puzzle is even trickier than the engineering one. It's not just about knowing how much damage happens, it's about figuring out how to price that damage efficiently across a huge network of roads, all with different ages and conditions. And this is where the real breakthrough happens.
And that brings us to the solution. In a 1990 Frisch medal-winning paper, an economist named David Newbery took on this problem with just incredible econometrician precision. Newbery's genius was that he focused, like a laser, on marginal analysis. Okay, think of it this way. Instead of everyone splitting a dinner bill evenly, imagine each person pays for exactly what they ordered. For roads, the goal isn't just to recover the total cost with some average fee. It's to charge each user the specific, incremental cost they impose on the system with every single trip.
So he built this really elegant structural framework. It was like an analytical engine. It took all the engineering data on axle weight and plugged it into economic models of infrastructure costs and traffic flow. And it was all designed to do just one thing: precisely estimate that marginal social cost of road use, teasing apart the costs of road damage from the costs of traffic congestion.
And this is a perfect example of a theme that just keeps popping up. Before this, debates about road pricing were mostly based on intuition and guesswork. Newbery's work showed how econometrics, which is all about turning these complex relationships into models, could completely transform that debate by replacing the guesswork with rigorous measurement.
And what came out of all this detailed analysis was this incredibly powerful and, frankly, pretty astonishing conclusion, which he called the fundamental theorem of road user charges. Now, what's so incredible about this finding is how totally counterintuitive it is. Remember that complex externality, the damage-raising costs for all the future users? Well, Newbery proved that across a whole network of roads, it effectively cancels itself out. Just like the quote says, the average road damage externality is zero. So the optimal charge just boils down to the average cost of repairing the road, allocated by how much damage each vehicle does. Okay, of course, the real world is never that simple. The theorem depends on two pretty big assumptions. The traffic is the only thing damaging roads, and the traffic volume is constant. In reality, weather also causes a ton of damage, and traffic is almost always growing. But here's the kicker. Newbery actually extended his model to account for these real-world factors. And what he found was that while the externality wasn't exactly zero anymore, it was still tiny. He called it quantitatively negligible.
We're talking less than 1/10 of a US cent per kilometer. So the core logic? It absolutely held up.
And this is where the idea gets really big. The implications of this disciplined, measurement-based approach to externalities, well, they extend far, far beyond just asphalt.
You can think of Newbery's framework as a kind of conceptual blueprint. It's for efficiently pricing the use of any shared system where one person's actions impose incremental costs on everyone else. This same logic is what's behind carbon pricing, airport landing fees, and how we price electricity grids and even data networks.
And in all of these different areas, the core intellectual challenge is exactly the same. It's not about arguing if an externality exists, it's about using data to measure its marginal social cost with as much precision as you possibly can.
You know, his paper wasn't just some abstract academic exercise. It was actually part of a much broader intellectual shift, one that showed how much applied economics had matured. By the early 90s, econometrics had really moved out of the classroom and into the world of applied policy, and it was shaping the real-world design of infrastructure pricing and regulation. And all of this leaves us with a final and pretty provocative thought. We now have the analytical tools to measure the hidden costs that are literally all around us, costs that used to be invisible or were just argued about with intuition. So the question isn't really, can we price them anymore? The real question is, what should we be pricing next?